Do you think the FIA judges all drivers with the same standard? Or that big names are treated differently? What Nico Rosberg said after the 2025 Brazilian GP could completely change your perception of refereeing in Formula One. Rosberg's bombshell was not an outburst. It was an elaborate accusation. And its impact was immediate. Journalists, drivers, fans, everyone started talking. Does the FIA really measure everyone with the same rule? How deep is the rift in F1 refereeing? And how many races, positions, or even championships could have been defined by questionable decisions? Brazil. Interlagos. A mythical circuit, scene of historic coronations, impossible comebacks, and also unforgettable controversies. It is in that place where one of the most talked about moments of the 2025 season takes place. The sanction to Lewis Hamilton after contact with Franco Colapinto. But to understand the magnitude of what happened, it is not enough to look at the incident itself. You have to look at everything around you. Everything that was not seen. Everything that, according to many and especially according to Nico Rosberg, the FIA chose to ignore. Because the truth is that Hamilton's Ferrari SF25 was already seriously compromised even before that contact. From the first corner of the race, his car stopped being a precision tool and became a constant challenge. A contact with Carlos Sainz significantly damaged the front wing. The component partially dislodged and became trapped under the flat bottom, generating not only a significant loss of downforce, but also a visibility and handling problem that lasted for several laps. Ferrari would later confirm that the car lost between 35 and 40 points of downforce. That, translated into performance, means about half a second per lap. But beyond the lost time, what is most relevant is the way in which this damage altered the behavior of the car. A Formula One car is calibrated to the millimeter. Any deviation, no matter how small, disrupts the overall balance of the vehicle. In the case of Hamilton's SF25, not only was front axle load lost, but airflow under the car was also affected, altering overall stability. This made the car unpredictable under braking, difficult to place in corners, and extremely nervous in high-speed areas, such as the straight where the incident with Colapinto occurred. But the most serious thing is that this context was not taken into account by the commissioners when evaluating the action. The contact with the Argentine driver occurred when Hamilton was trying to overtake. Colapinto had made a small mistake in the previous corner, which opened an opportunity for the Ferrari to gain ground. But at the moment of launching the movement, Hamilton's car reacted erratically, clearly a product of its lack of stability. The situation became inevitable. While Colapinto defended himself by moving slightly to the inside, Hamilton could not completely control the trajectory. The result was a light touch. There were no spins, there was no major damage to the Alpine. However, the FIA decided that Hamilton was fully responsible and penalized him with 5 seconds and 1 point on the super license. Now, is it possible to consider fully responsible a driver who is struggling to maintain control of a car that is no longer responding as it should? From a regulatory perspective, the FIA hides behind Article 38.2 of the International Sports Code, which allows anyone who causes a collision to be sanctioned. But this literal interpretation of the rule ignores the technical context that completely transforms the evaluation of the incident. And that is precisely what voices like Rosberg or Fred Vasseur himself, head of Ferrari, denounce. Vasseur presented telemetry, precise data, showing how the SF25 had lost balance. It was also shown that the differential speed between both cars was minimal, that there was no aggressive intention or lasting sporting advantage after the touch. However, none of that was considered by the commissioners. The evaluation was done in an isolated, almost superficial way, completely ignoring the factors that made this contact inevitable. And this is where the real question arises. What value is engineering, the science behind sports, if it is not taken into account in key decisions? How is it possible that a penalty is issued without completely analyzing the mechanical and dynamic conditions of the car involved? In a category where the margins are so small, where each change in aerodynamics alters the complete behavior of the car, omitting these types of variables is simply unacceptable. What happened in Brazil was not a simple piloting error. It was the outcome of a chain of technical and dynamic events that cannot be separated from the final scene. Treating it as an isolated maneuver is dishonest from a technical point of view and deeply unfair from a sporting point of view. And the most alarming thing, as Rosberg points out, is that these types of simplifications are becoming common in FIA referee decisions. The incident with Colapinto became the perfect excuse to penalize Hamilton. But for those who understand how a Formula One car works, the real question is not whether there was contact, but why it happened. And when you analyze why, the verdict should be very different from the one that was finally imposed. When Lewis Hamilton's sanction was officially announced, it not only changed his result in Brazil, it set off a chain of reactions throughout the paddock that exposed an uncomfortable truth that many have preferred not to discuss publicly: the persistent suspicion that Formula One does not always apply its rules with the same standard. The inconsistency of these judgments is not a simple emotional perception. It is documented. It is in the reports, in the official statements, in the precedents that accumulate race after race. Rosberg is not complaining about a sanction. Point out a pattern. And that is where the argument takes strength. Because when sporting decisions seem to vary depending on the name of the driver or the team he represents, then we are no longer talking about isolated errors, but rather a deeply flawed structure that undermines the credibility of the competition. And this perception is not unique to Rosberg. Many within the paddock have begun to whisper the same thing. Engineers who do not understand how certain maneuvers are ruled. Pilots who, when faced with identical incidents, receive diametrically opposite consequences. Teams that complain again and again without their technical arguments being even considered. What should be a sport based on precision, objectivity, engineering, and data analysis begins to look more like a theater where the rules can be molded according to the cast. And it is not that the FIA does not have a regulatory framework. On the contrary, there is a clear regulation, with specific articles such as the famous 38.2 that was used to justify Hamilton's sanction in Brazil. But the regulation, by definition, must be applied uniformly. It cannot be a carte blanche that is freely interpreted according to the case, nor can it become a tool for indirect manipulation of the show. Rosberg, by denouncing this, is not just defending a former driver or a former teammate with whom he had a strained relationship. He is defending the principle of sports justice. Because if arbitration decisions stop being based on facts and begin to respond to external factors, name, popularity, nationality, commercial interests, then the very value of each result is called into question. Racing would no longer simply be a competition between machines and talent. They would be a controlled narrative, where some protagonists can risk more because they know they will have impunity, while others must drive with constant fear of being penalized for maneuvers that, in other contexts, are classified as racing incidents. And this suspicion does not only affect the pilots, it affects the fans, to the engineers, to the sponsors, to the entire teams that invest hundreds of millions to compete on equal terms. Because if equality is not guaranteed from the most basic, impartial administration of the rules, then the championship loses meaning, loses prestige, loses legitimacy. The question then is no longer whether or not Hamilton deserved that penalty. The question is much more serious. How many decisions in recent years have been made with the same distorted criteria? How many careers have been altered by these types of inconsistent judgments? And how much longer can Formula One survive without facing this uncomfortable conversation? Rosberg, by raising his voice, is not only pointing his finger at the FIA. He points to all of us. Because accepting injustice in silence is also a way of validating it. The 2025 Brazilian Grand Prix will not go down in history for an epic battle for victory or for an overtake in the last corner. He will be remembered for something much more serious, an exposed crack in the system that should uphold the justice of sport. And although the incident on the track was minor, its symbolic consequences are profound. Because when someone with the moral authority and technical expertise of Nico Rosberg says that the FIA has crossed a dangerous line, it is not just an opinion, it's a warning. Formula One has invested billions to build a global, technologically advanced spectacle, followed by hundreds of millions of people. It has perfected every aerodynamic detail, optimized every power system, refined safety to unprecedented levels. But all that can collapse if the heart that regulates sports arbitration competition is perceived as inconsistent, partial, or manipulable. Because in a sport where the margins between glory and failure are measured in thousands, a single wrong decision can rewrite history. The Hamilton-Colapinto case calls into question much more than a specific sanction. It forces us to question the entire process. Who decides? How is it decided? What level of technical analysis is considered? Is an incident involving a debutante evaluated with the same rigor as that of a seven-time world champion? Is there a transparent and public system that allows teams and fans to understand the reason for each failure? The most alarming thing is that these types of controversies are no longer isolated exceptions. They are recurring patterns. It is enough to review the last 2 years to find inexplicable decisions, contradictory sanctions, and rules interpreted with a worrying flexibility. The FIA, far from making its logic transparent, seems to move with internal criteria that are rarely explained clearly. and that has generated an environment of distrust. A void where suspicion, criticism, and discredit grow. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.